Thank you for auditing Professor Sky's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a professor of French, who now 2 videos in a row is reviewing some great, exciting, vital new music from France. The band is called Femme, which means both woman and wife in French, and the album is called Paradigme, which means paradigms and is hard to pronounce in any language. This may sound like hyperbole, but I would say that this is probably the best non-hip-hop French language album of the century. Now listen, I don't listen to a ton of non-hip-hop music from France, but I do pay some attention to it, and I haven't found something this good in a long, long time. Now before you think of me as potentially being a chauvinist, for my country, for the United States, I do think that the 3 best albums of the century were all made by people whose first language was French. Racine Carrée by Stromae, Bankrupt by Phoenix, and Random Access Memories by Daft Punk. I would say all 3 of those albums are probably the best albums of the century, even though they all came out in the same year. And the final album, Daft Punk, I would say has a good argument to be perhaps the greatest single album of all time. I mean that. So when I'm saying that I'm excited about this because it's good music from France, that's not the anomaly. It's that it is very, very in French. And this is the thing. If you're just watching this video and you think, I don't want to listen to music that's in French, I command you, okay? I don't command anybody on this channel, but I command you, fight through it. Learn to enjoy and love this music. There's a couple reasons why you should musically, but before we get there, the way that I sort of want to give a framing device for this album is that I would say it's kind of the return of what I call French cool. And the thing is, there's different kinds of cool in different places, right? And what I'm going to try to do here is explain a little bit about what French cool is, and then I will sort of expand it as to why this album is a good example of French cool. One of what I believe to be the linchpins of French cool is very philosophically sound cool, very educated cool, the kind of cool that reads for fun. Yes, there's a lot of irony, perhaps to a fault. Yes, there's a lot of distance in that irony, sometimes to a fault, but sometimes that irony will drop. I think a lot of what makes French cool so cool is that it's the country that literally invented the concept of a public intellectual. It is a country in which philosophers are actually stars, okay? Like walk down the street, get their autograph kind of stars. It's a country where the education system insists so much on philosophy that, in American high schools, we have, chem, bio, calc. French high school students, and I know because I used to teach in a French high school, Lycée Saint-Charles in Marseille, they call it philo because they all have to study and learn philosophy. This comes through in their hip-hop, and this comes through in their rock and roll and their techno and their pop. It's everywhere. It's part of what gives the culture its different feel. Can you imagine an America in which every person who graduated high school spent at least a year studying philosophy at a high level? Often the stereotypes of French cool is, cigarettes and wine. And okay, that's a stereotype, which is often true. I think the thing to emphasize is that these are things that are used to feed conversation, right? It's not like Coca-Cola and chewing gum, right, for America, which is helping us be on the go and consume and consume and consume. If this cigarettes and wine stereotype has any point, it's that you are at a dinner table, it's that you are somewhere at a cafe and you are discussing over a long period of time. Part of what makes French cool culture cool is that it doesn't care if you like its culture. I've done a lot of videos about French artists on this channel, and nobody in France gives a care at all. They don't care. They don't come on here saying, oh, thank you for caring about our culture. Now, I've done videos about artists from Ghana and a lot of artists from Serbia and Croatia. Whenever I do that, people come on and say, thank you for paying attention to our culture. France hasn't been culturally dominant for at least a century, but they don't care. They don't need to prove anything. They know that their culture is great. And that's part of the reason why the French cool is insouciant. It doesn't care. Sometimes it seems rude, but that rudeness comes from honesty. I was speaking with my former professor who taught me most of what I know about French music. I had him in college. And I was asking him, what would you describe as the origin of French cool? And he said, well, I think it's the opposite of excitement. The feeling of excitement. is the opposite of that, I think, is a good way of describing French cool. Another thing to know is if you're in France and you walk into a store and you say hi and you smile, people aren't going to smile back. People don't smile at you if they don't know you. And here's a question, why should they? Who are you? You're just a stranger. One of my best friends is a Frenchman, and he would barely even talk to me for the first couple of years that I knew him, because the process of becoming a friend takes a lot longer, and then the friendship that you make is a lot stronger. Wrapped up in all this is the artifice of cool, which is always the problem with cool itself, right? And I think a lot of times when we think about what is cool, sometimes it gets mixed up with our image of what is a hipster. And I would say that the image of what is a hipster in America is an evolution of an older term. You see, the term hipster didn't exist when I was in my 20s. I would know because I was a hipster. I was such a hipster, I was a hipster before there were hipsters. But back then, we didn't use that term. We used the term Eurotrash. People who were fortunate enough to go to England or go to Paris or go to Spain or go somewhere in Europe and experience this culture, this different way of being cool, and came back to America with their gitans and their belief in public health systems and like spread that to people around them. So I think it's interesting because this kind of transition into a hipster shows a kind of loss in American culture. The fact that we don't look as much as we used to Europe, the young people don't look as much to Europe for what is cool, which is especially a shame when they're missing albums like this, Paradigme by Femme. Okay? Holy cow, this album is obscenely well produced. Whole thing, start to finish, listen to it at least twice. I mean, just do yourself a favor. The album starts off with a complete party. It ends with a song that sounds like the end of a party. It's really fun. It's really moving. Yes, there's only one song in English, but I promise you, just listen. Pretend that you're a French person listening to an American song like they have to all the time. Pretend that you're from somewhere else where you aren't born with the gift of living in the imperial domination of the English language. And you'll really enjoy this album. According to Wikipedia, and this is a pretty good description of the band, they are synthetic and hypnotic, which I think is true, although they're not too hypnotic. They are listed, their influences are listed as the Velvet Underground, Kraftwerk, and Ye Ye. And I think this is what's really interesting. It's particularly this Ye Ye influence. Here's my kind of crappy compilation CD of Ye Ye music, which is actually very good. The thing about Ye Ye is it was a form of music that existed in France for a pretty brief period of time in the 60s. It was mostly covering and copying American songs and translating them into French. Okay, there's a whole system about it. Actually, that professor that I was talking about, he wrote an article about it. I'll put that in the description if I can get it from him. The professor's professor, if you will. That was how it started. But there was a figure who really helped to transform Ye Ye, and that's a very well-known figure to most Americans, Serge Gainsbourg. Okay, and Serge Gainsbourg, what he did was he took Ye Ye singers and he gave them better songs. And he sort of shifted it away from being just a copy of American to a French version of rock and roll. I think this album bears a lot of Velvet Underground, I hear that, a lot of krautrock and a lot of Kraftwerk and all that. But really what I hear mostly is not that it sounds like Gainsbourg, but it has a similar desire. There's basically two creators in this band, and they use musicians the way Gainsbourg does. They use female singers the way Gainsbourg did, where they use them to just create this very agreeable, very intellectually satisfying, stimulating pop. That's what Gainsbourg managed to do. He was sick of being a jazz star and he just wanted to be a pop star, and so he just made it happen. That's what happens on this album. It is a complete pop album, but there's not a single bad note on the entire thing. It is a great mixture of synthetic and acoustic. Though you have keyboards next to like a clarinet solo and a banjo, an amazing mixture of both elements. It's mostly pop, but there's a lot of different genres, especially Western genres in here. It is, for lack of a better word, as high of a recommendation as I can give to an album. I would give to this. How would I say this with a bad American accent? La Femme, Paradigmes, okay? So do yourself a favor, listen to Paradigmes by La Femme. For homework, I always give one song as an example song to listen to. I'm going to make it easier for you because Lord knows no French person is going to sit through some American talking about French music for 20 minutes. Although if you are there, si vous êtes français et vous m'écoutez, vous laissez un petit message dans les commentaires, ça me plaira. So I know that you're an American or most likely an Anglophone here watching. So I will give you the one song that is in English as an example. Fortunately, this entire album is so good. It's a beautiful cut of steak and there's not a bad bite in the entire thing. So I'm going to, and if it's a French steak, it's completely raw in the color of my shirt. Up here, you will see a link to the song Foreigner, okay? The only song in English. Now what you'll notice is that the accent on here is intentionally very strong. I think this is an example of there's a very complex relationship with American culture, with American themes throughout this album. I think that's intentional. I imagine this person probably actually doesn't have this thick of an accent in reality, but the whole song is the idea of losing a lover and becoming like a foreigner to this person. I don't have a passport for your heart. A simple, goofy pop lyric, but it's delivered with this amazing synth line that's created, these pulsing synthesizers. It seems like it's just a bare bones, absolutely impossibly simple song, but when you listen to the production, it's so rich. And this whole concept of like being a foreigner is a very intentional meta commentary on being a foreigner in pop music, on being a foreigner in singing in English. I think this whole thing is simultaneously about feeling rejected by American culture or by other cultures and being rejected by a woman. It's a surprisingly profound and beautiful song about feeling alienated from other people as an individual and as an individual to a group. And it's all in this one song. And it's goofy and it's funny and it's that cool way. You can just imagine yourself being in a cafe, hanging around with some guy with kind of a douchey haircut and sort of talking about, and like, it's just cool. It's just got that really cool distance, but also meaning, right? Like distance and depth. I think that's the problem. Often Americans, when they're trying to be cool, they get the aloof part, but they don't follow it up with actually knowing anything. They don't follow it up with being intellectually interesting. So that when you actually go deeper with a lot of like cool guys in America or cool girls in America, at the bottom of it, there's just nothing. And with this music, there is definitely something. There's a whole line in here. There's a swear in it. I'll say it. But it's just so funny the way he delivers it. You fuck this guy without a condom, a DJ or whatever, and I am sick of that. And it's just, as someone who has taught French and English, that is a very difficult word to say for the French, and I like that you hear it. At the end, when you're listening, you'll hear this beautiful vocoder solo coming in at the end. I don't know if this is a meta commentary on vocoder as a symbol of French music in America, which I think it is, because that's what Daft Punk really did, was they popularized the vocoder in America, after it had been done in the 70s, in funk. And I don't know. This is the kind of song, it could be a huge hit. It could be a gigantic hit. It could play in a movie and everybody could know it. It could just be like one of those songs that could just take over the world. And hopefully it will. So that's my homework for you. I'm now going to go over the rest of the album, which is tout en français. So the first track, Paradigme. Why am I having such trouble pronouncing this word? Paradigme. Paradigme. Oh, paradigme. Okay. Because GN makes a nya sound, but GM makes no different sound. So that, like I'm saying, it starts off with a party. It sounds like a drum machine, but it's actually a drummer, just super heavy drums, ridiculous horn section mixed with like this raunchy harmonica playing. Like they just start right off and it just sounds like a roaring 20s party mixed up with this amazingly manipulated and distorted female voice that's doubled with a high and a low. It's like this epic sounding song. And of course, the lyrics are about nothingness. Again, I'm talking about the importance of what makes French cool. Here's the chorus. Pendant la nuit, les paradigmes s'effacent. Les masques tombent pour célébrer le néant et la folie. Dans cette énigme qu'on appelle la vie, j'ai envie de courir et de pleurer. During the night, paradigms erase themselves. The masks fall to celebrate nothingness and insanity. In this enigma that we call life, I want to run and to cry. It is really important to understand that even just the concept of nothingness, most popularized by first Blaise Pascal and then by Jean-Paul Sartre, The idea that philosophy is so important in French life is part of the reason why nothingness would pop up in the middle of a pop song, okay? I mean, how often do American pop stars sing about nothingness? Never. But le néant is everywhere in French culture and pop music. And here we are. This song that's sort of about like the end of a party being kind of lame. And here we have this concept of everything falling into nothingness and insanity. The next track, Le sang de mon prochain, the blood of my like neighbor or my person who's close to me. It's very hard to translate prochain in this case. Has just like a guitar and voice. In this case, it's basically a straight yeye song. My professor, who I've talked about a couple times, he's written articles on yeye. He's a great expert on yeye. And I sent him a link to this song. So I'm like, this is as close as we're going to get to a 21st century yeye song. And it's great. It does all the things that yeye does, where it's serious and it's funny. It's very catchy. It's naive, but it's knowing, like, that's what Gainsbourg was so good with the songs he wrote, especially for France Gall, was having like a knowing song sung naively. And this song has that same feeling. It's sort of like a horror song about being a vampire, sort of like a vampire of love, chasing after a dead love. It's a weird parallel. The last album I reviewed was by L'Impératrice, which is another great French band. This was totally unintentional, by the way. I don't know why 2 great French albums came out in 2 weeks. What's happening over there? Besides a disastrous reaction to COVID. So like, they also have another song, Peur des filles, which has another kind of horror theme. So in both cases, we have sort of intellectual horror themes wrapped up with bizarre societal commentary. Quite good. Next track is called Cool Colorado. So this is part of this Western theme of this album. When I say Western, I mean like Ennio Morricone, I mean like songs that sound like they're made for cowboys. And even the idea of talking about Colorado, the French are obsessed with cowboys. There's a cartoon called Lucky Luke, which, come to think of it, I have a whole bunch of Lucky Luke. I should have had that as my prop. I don't know where it is on my bookshelf, though. They're obsessed with the American West, and it makes sense that they'd be obsessed with the American West because it's such a foreign concept. And so this feels like it's in there, but it's almost a throwback to the way French songs about America used to be. See, the world's a lot smaller now, and in general, if a French person wants to go to America and experience it, it's not quite the same spectacular exposure to this totally foreign place as it was 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 30 years ago, right? But this song reminds me almost of this old song, Folklore Américain by Sheila, or New York, New York by Gainsbourg. Just like, there's a sense of Lointain Amérique, the faraway America. He even makes reference to Sweet Georgia Brown being on the radio. Now Sweet Georgia Brown is not playing on the radio in America. There's something about this where it's out of place and out of time. And it ends with him even talking about going to LA, and he does a little bit more of his weird pidgin English about all these cool people. But there's a beautiful instrumental part in here. Again, just the production on this album is so good. And the whole thing just has this real feeling of a French take on the Western myth after the Western myth has been debunked. That's what this song is. I'm telling you, this is a super deep album. I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about Lucky Luke. He's this cowboy in the Old West. And the thing is, the French don't know that Americans don't know who Lucky Luke is, because they assume it's about America. So they're always like, Lucky Luke. And we don't know Lucky Luke, although I've read him because he's funny. Next track is called Foutre le bordel, which means it's just like a triple swear word. It's like foutre is like essentially the F word in French, and the bordel is sort of also like, basically it's like fuck shit up. That's basically how we could say that. This is not a Western song. This is a new wave punk song, very consciously, I believe, in the mode of Plastic Bertrand, who you know as the person who wrote that one song that everyone knows from the 80s. Allez hop, ça dans mes divans. Je suis le roi de devant, right? That kind of famous song that's everywhere. I think this is very much in that mode. It seems to be maybe a political song. He says it's the return of the terror, and I just want to fuck shit up, and it has this very intentionally 80s sounding feel, and even a reference to the collabos, the collaborators. which is a constant theme. I teach a class on French rock and hip hop, and the collabo, the collaborator, is always the worst person in all French societies, whether it's hip hop, rock, pop, whatever it is. Very cool instrumentation here too, where sometimes they drop out sound and sometimes they add it. Next track, Nouvelle-Orléans, which is just New Orleans in French. Very kind of simple box style chords, like do, 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 do. Actually reminds me a fair amount of Tous les Mêmes by Stromae, the chords and the way that it sounds. Also, at times, there's this very delicate arpeggiated synthesizers over the top. And all these things mixed together with just a really yay voice. You know, yay voices are often very clear, very simple, female voices that are catchy, not particularly challenging, not particularly flashy, and that's what we have here in this song about thinking about going home to your mom and to your dog. Pasadena is this song, the next song. I don't know why it's called Pasadena. I don't think it takes place in Pasadena. And it's like a love song. It's like a love song about remembering when he was 13 and kissing this girl and how it made him grow up and how he's grown apart from her. But what's nice is that the whole thing is about this was an experience that made me grow up. And then the chorus of the song, so he's kind of talking through the verse, and the chorus is a female voice saying, oh, I hate to tell you the truth, but I have to move away and I have made you grow up. Awesome vocal solo at the end. It almost sounds broken. Like it sounds like they were so rad that they broke the machine. Lâchez les chevaux, release, basically like, it's a horse term for like let the horses go, like, you know, kind of go wild, go faster. A instrumental track, the low point of the album for me, because it reminds me so much of the track Nights of Sidonia, whatever that track was by Muse, which is a fine track, but it feels it's a little too conscious of sounding Western without too much addition to it. Like there's even like horse sound effects in the song. It's a little bit too much, but that's okay because that leads to the next track, Disconnexion, which is still in the Western mode, but they've really improved it. Like the previous song was like, this one is great. It starts off with the sort of like a new order, 1, 2, 3, 4 bump on the bass drum, and then he just starts talking. So remember I was talking about what makes French cool, right? So in this album, we've had the distance, we've had the intellect, right? We've had this kind of like irony, but also a kind of like knowingness and all these different genres, right? But let's really get to philosophy, okay? This is essentially a song which I will be teaching next time I teach the work of Blaise Pascal, okay? 17th century, a lot of people know him as a scientist, I know him as a philosopher. So the whole song starts off, I'm just going to translate on the fly here because I don't feel like reading it in French. I think the biggest problem for mankind is the unending desire to expand, the Cartesian physical limits. And he talks about the vertiginous insignificance of our existences. Again, it is an important aspect that French society and culture really talks about existentialism overtly in public. It is something which every French person, through their school system, has to come into interaction with, right? And this, by consequence, by the usage of artifice, we arrive to disconnect ourselves from this Pascalian reality, which makes us so afraid. So this whole intro here is basically trying to touch on this section from Pascal's Pensées, La Disproportion de l'Homme, where he talks about how man is incapable of understanding how small he is when he thinks about the infinity of the sky, or if he thinks about like the microbes inside of the blood of an insect, he's impossibly large, that we are just incapable of understanding our place in the universe, and that creates some kind of fear and puts us into what he calls un abîme nouveau, a new abyss. And this is what Pascal is describing, right? He describes all of existence as an infinite sphere in which the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere. What is a man in nature? Not a nothing in relationship to the infinite, a everything in relationship to nothingness. A middle in between nothing and everything. Le néant. It comes back again. I think this is cool that we're having a pop song and we're having a pop album and we're having a lot of fun with some great production. It sounds like 2021, and these guys, I've seen like what they look like in concert on YouTube, and they're partying and they're having fun, and we're still thinking about this. And what I love is that he actually uses the word in the singing. He says, "Cette réalité pascalienne qui nous effraie tant." This word effrayer. There's this amazing, so these were all written in fragments. They were never actually published properly as a book. So this is one of the most famous fragments from Pascal. Le silence éternel de ces espaces infinis m'effraie. That's it. That's all it says. The eternal silence of these infinite spaces horrifies me. That was it. He just woke up one day and wrote that down on a piece of paper and then put it away, and then he died, and then they published it. And ever since then, anyone who is lucky enough to have to read Pascal at some point in their life has to read that sentence and live with it for the rest of their lives. The eternal silence of these infinite spaces horrifies me. And that's what this song is about. That's what this wonderful little pop song is about in this song. And then you know what happens? You know what they do next? I'm going to tell you because you're not going to believe it. I'm going to have a sip from my Joe Cool coffee cup. This is what's cool to me. What makes me cool is my Joe Cool coffee cup. Although, presumably, Snoopy has never read Pascal. After all that philosophical thought, there's a banjo solo. like a totally sick banjo solo. Like, oh, banjo solo in the middle of this song. I don't know why it's there, but it's a great example of this transposition between the acoustic and the electric. This relationship just keeps going. I need to stop moving because it keeps making the focus change and the light change on the camera. Then we get Foreigner, and then we get to the track Force and Respect, which has like this reggaeton beat. My wife was painting the wall in the living room, and I was making a parfait for my daughter. We eat a lot of parfait in this house. C'est parfait. And I was like cutting up like strawberries and stuff, and I was just dancing. Like the whole back half of this album, I was just dancing around the house. I'm not a particularly good dancer, but I'm a great dancer, if that makes sense. And there's a great kind of reggaeton beat. There's like a gong, and everything builds up. And I was just dancing, and like Toby was there, you know, my dog Toby, who's very nervous. And I was like dancing and like staring right in his face, and he was having an existential crisis. It was just great. And then the lyrics to this wonderful, fun dance song are as follows. And I'm going to translate these for you as well. And if you are not listening to this album yet, what are you doing? Don't force respect, and respect force. But if force does not respect you, then force respect, and don't respect the force. Okay? Don't force respect, respect force. If force doesn't respect you, force respect, and don't respect that force. A beautiful way of talking about our situation in life, about our relationship to authority of all kinds, a relationship to us. And it's just this beautiful, as they would say, a French person would say in English, a beautiful idea. They can't say idea. That's one of the hardest words for French people to say, which is tragic because they always talk about, it's a very good idea to have that. And they can't say idea. Idea. And actually my father, who's from Boston, pronounces it often idea, which is a whole nother way. So who am I to say who can pronounce idea or not? Divine créature. Oh my God, this is probably my favorite song on the album. I just love this track. There's a word for like kind of sketchy in French, which is louche. It's a very louche male voice, very Gainsbourg-esque. I played it on my hi-fi back there, and I was just dancing around, cutting strawberries, cleaning off blueberries, preparing unsweetened yogurt. And it goes in this beautiful chorus, and it seems to be about someone who's enraptured with love and enraptured with a lover or a hopeful lover. But this whole concept of like the beauty of the divine is going to be dominating him. It actually says that la divine te domine. So it's a dialogue, and often the male and the female voices in this album are used in dialogue. So it's a dialogue between this person who is totally enslaved by this divine creature and this divine creature who says, I enslave you. A beautiful, just an ambient banger. There's no other way to say it. Like, you play it and you're just enraptured in this whole world of music and synthesizers and vocoders and voice and singing and speaking. It's a great piece of art. It really is. Next track is called Monami. And all of a sudden, what happened to Mr. Cool? What happened to Mr. Distant? What happened to this French cool? It is this very sweet, earnest song. A song to a friend who died too young. It is ridiculously earnest and sweet. I have a friend who's actually recently suffered a inconceivable loss, and I was thinking about that friend. And this song was playing, and I was thinking about loss, and the whole thing is about how the people who you lose are still with you and you still see them. And I was at the gym. I'm back at the gym now that I'm vaccinated, and I was stretching. You know, I was on that stretching machine, and I was stretching out like that, and I was just crying like a baby. I was just thinking about loss, and I was thinking about the way this song talks about loss. I was thinking about my friend, and I was pretty surprised that here we are in the middle of this very cool French thing. America is, but sometimes is good Colorado. And here I am, absolutely tapping into my heart, totally unexpected. But it's part of the strength of this album. Almost a drone in the back, which I think the synthesizer is almost a drone, like a chugging beat behind, because really everything is in service to this very emotional message. Le Jardin is the next song, The Garden. The only song I don't love on this album. I don't hate it, I don't skip it, but I don't love it. It's in Spanish, that's fine. I speak Spanish enough to understand what they're saying. La vida es un puta. Life is a whore. I don't quite know, but it reminds me of like a graduation song, like kind of like a cheesy song you might hear at a graduation. Fortunately, it's followed up by the track Va, which just means go, the shortest sentence in the French language. Va. Just like in English, the shortest sentence in the English language is go. There you go. Again, kind of a more Western sound, except with this ridiculous keyboard. This keyboard that's so loud and matches the female singer's voice just perfectly. It just matches it, the melody exactly. And she's singing this song. Va comme l'oiseau qui chante à ma fenêtre et ne te retourne pas. Va comme l'oiseau, sans Dieu ni maître. So it's a song about go like the bird that sings at my window and don't come back. Go like the bird without God, without a master. Another part of French cool is their education and their belief in poetry. Okay? America, in general, does not respect poetry. It makes sense. We're a new country. But in France, there's a sense that there's been a poetical continuity, you know, going from, you know, people like Maurice in the Renaissance, French word, all the way till now. And there's a desire for artists like Gainsbourg, and I would even say like these guys, to take part in that long continuity of poetry. That's part of the reason why sometimes their lyrics can seem just completely abstruse, because they're not just trying to be rock lyrics or pop lyrics, they're trying to be a part of this long sense of poetry. I would say a deep love and understanding of poetry and philosophy is part of that French cool. I swear, it's not all just good bread and cigarettes. There's a lot more to it. The album ends with tout en lasse, like you let yourself go, or you're kind of going away, basically. This song is finally, the whole album I've been waiting to hear the Velvet Underground influence that is vaunted all over any publicity about them. This song is a great modern update of a Velvet Underground song. 2 chords, back and forth, very atmospheric, droning, and then I believe what is a clarinet solo at the end that is just a blisteringly wonderful, beautiful ending. Like I said, the album starts with this party, it ends with this ending, which is just meditative and calm and beautiful. So there you go. Please let me know if you are actually going to listen to this album and if this helps. I know most people come to this channel to watch me talk about music that they've already decided they like. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. But if you're somebody who also likes to discover new things, I hope you discover this. These are my Patreons. I will be using my Patreon money this month to buy this album. I absolutely love it. My daughter made the Patreon logo, so I had a hard time getting everyone's name in there. So thank you very much. If you want to help me on Patreon, I only use the money to buy music. I don't use it to buy anything else. I have a job, so I don't need money. but I like buying music. And so if you give me money, I will buy more music, okay? So thank you to everyone there for doing that. And now I just feel like reading Pascal. Okay, well, for the infinite silence that horrifies you, there's the camera.